Good afternoon, everyone. So we can stay on track, I will just do a brief overview of the Keep It in the Family project. The U.S. Endowment for Forest and Community Service created this initiative in 2012. And we actually applied, but we did not get approved for the first round. It was Alabama, South Carolina, and North Carolina, which are our sister sites. They're part of the Sustainable Forestry and Land Retention Project. In 2016, we applied again, which was led by Mr. Charlie Williams and my supervisor, Dr. Henry English. We were approved during that round, and along with Georgia. In 2017, there were two other sites that came on to this initiative, which was Mississippi and Virginia, and followed by Texas last year. With our project, Keeping It in the Family, we started serving 7 counties. There was such interest in the project, we have since expanded to 18 counties, and some of you may not be a part of those counties. We still reach out to other counties in Arkansas to help those forest landowners. When we began this project, we had basically two objectives. One was to address heirs property issue, and the second was to address conservation concerns. Since that time, we hired a forester, which is Mr. Joe Friend. Many of you have met or spoke to him by phone. He conducts site visits along with our partners, which consist of the Arkansas Department of Ag Forestry Division, which you've heard from Justin Mallet. And he is a county forester. And so each county has a forester, and they work along with Mr. Friend, along with Mr. Charlie Williams and Lavelle Foote, who are both conservationists, retired conservationists. Again, we service 18 counties. I guess I should go back and say the reason this project or initiative was started in the early 1900s, African-American landowners owned about 19 million acres of farmland. Since that time, it has been reduced to 3.8 million. Some land was taken, some was lost during because of tax default and just other reasons, family members selling their interest. But now, as far as this project, the U.S. has about, well, African-American landowners own about 1.2 million forest acres. And we're hoping that the landowners can either retain those acres or even add to those acres and make them productive, and also increase generational wealth. We want the kids to stay engaged and learn how important it is to own land and also be productive landowners, to make sure we continue to have healthy forest lands and teach them the importance of having healthy forest land. So I guess I will open it up. If you have any questions about Keeping It in the Family, I'll be happy to answer those questions before turning it back over to Yvette.
Okay, Candy, I see you've got a question. It says, when did you say it started? And also the 19 million acres, are they Black owned?
Yes, in the early 1900s, around 1910, African-American landowners actually had 19, well, some say between 16 to 19 million acres of agriculture land. Since that time, there's been, well, normally you look at the census, that keeps track of ag land. In 2017, African American landowners only owned about 3.8 million acres. Of that 3.8 million acres, African American landowners own 1.2 million forest acres.
Okay, so Candy, I do notice you have another question here. So that we can stay on time, would you mind looking at the chat and responding to the attendee through chat, please?
Okay, yes.
Okay, and thank you for giving us that history. It's important for us to know where we were and where we are so that we can try to really uh, utilize the land that Black-owned families still have to the fullest. Okay, so our next speaker here is going to be Dr. Anthony Reed from Alcorn State University. He's the Director of Special Projects, and he's going to talk to us today about land and property rights. So Dr. Reed, you have the floor.
Much. Did everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, good. As we know, when we start using technology, things tend to act up when you need them. So my presentation is not open up this very second, but it will be momentarily. But I am honored to be here with you guys this evening, and I love the topic, keeping it in the family, because that's exactly what I want to talk to you a little bit about this evening, about the opportunity of keeping land in the family, because a large percentage of land was actually lost from a number of families for over many, many years. I had an opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. for about 3 months, and I studied the land loss issues for the state of Mississippi. And it was over 16 million acres of land that was actually lost over just a 5-year time frame. I think that's a substantial amount of land lost for just a short window of time. And I think that we need to do everything we can to make sure that our land stays where we want it to be. Okay, it should be coming up here. Trying to share my screen. Okay, are you guys see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you, so you're good.
Great, let me move these things out the way so you can see and so that I can see. All right, again, the topic as mentioned about keeping it in the family, I think it is ideal, but our biggest problem is that I had an opportunity to not only work in DC for 3 months and study the land laws issues, but within the last year, I studied land laws in relation to air property for about 10 different states, basically from most of the southern quarter. And pretty much the ideal of the land that was actually in air property and the state that had already passed the Uniform Petition Air Property Act, there was very little difference in terms of the state that already passed the act compared to the state that have not passed the act. And the biggest factor that I see is education, because they wasn't aware of what their rights were as a landowner, what programs were made available to them. They wasn't aware of the 2018 Farm Bill that made it a lot more accessible to be able to get control of their property. So we need to do a lot in terms of trying to educate our citizens about our property and about the benefits of those programs that have been made available through not only just the Farm Bill, but the states has already done as well. Okay. Now I don't want to incorporate. My screen is freezing now. All right. Well, let me stop sharing and then I will try and reset it. Well, why the screen is incorporated. One of the things that I have in my presentation to talk to you guys a little bit about tonight, I want to talk to you about air property, want to talk to you about eminent domain. I also want to talk to you about the laws that relate to trespassing on other people's property in terms of what the landowner's roles, rights, and responsibilities to the individual persons actually on somebody else's property. Your Arkansas is I guess a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to our property, because you guys passed your laws back in 2015. Uniform Petition Air Property Act in 2015, and even in Mississippi, we've only passed ours just in July of 2020. So we're just now getting to where you guys were. So all the things you actually have done, you actually have gone on, find out you passed a law at the state level. Then you actually have gone on and saw how you can actually to improve upon it, because you made some adjustments to it since 2015. And then now you're still ahead of the curve when it comes to Mississippi in terms of what it actually means to the landowner, how they can get access to that property, and make sure that not only they have access to it and control of it, they're able to apply for those benefits by getting a farm ID number through USDA, Farm Service Agency, which then enable them to be able to apply for the program services through FSA, program through NRCS, risk management, and so on. So now you share my screen clearly. When I put this gentleman's face on the screen, I want you guys just to look at it and see, is this somebody that looks familiar to you? Or maybe somebody that looks like you're in the mirror, which is a person who have got a few years on them, who I'm sure, who has spent quite a few years, who have worked on his farm and have gone through a lot of adversity to make sure his soils are prepared, make sure that he's actually able to plant, make sure he's actually able to harvest, he's actually able to sell. Then beyond just the production side of it, he was actually struggling to try to make sure how to keep that farm that he has spent a substantial number of years to try and to make it a productive farm, because he didn't want to lose, especially if you have a farm that actually been in your family for a number of generations. Like I say, keep it in the family. You want to make sure that if you as an individual or your family has spent a substantial number of years trying to keep your farm operating, do you want to be lost for some simple reasons? Or this gentleman here may be another face that you may be familiar with, not in terms of the actual person, but in terms of a person who actually have worked on the farm, building up substantial wealth, trying to make sure that he's able to feed his family, but then he's also able to create a productive enterprise so he can actually transfer it over to the next generation. And we don't want them to lose that because of a number of different simple reasons. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of land, air property, the 2018 Farm Bill and its implications to air property, eminent domain, and adverse possession. And all these can be tied to the state of Arkansas. Now, if you see this picture on the screen, this is a beautiful, beautiful scene of an ag location. Beautiful. And for me, as I got to be an adult driving across the countryside, I learned to really appreciate what agriculture means, not just to me in terms of a business, but what it actually meant to me and my family to keep something of that nature. And that's a beautiful sight. And what's even more beautiful is to be able to go out there and stand on property that you actually own. This lady here is now standing on the street, or you would say in the country, on the road, in front of the property that she actually owns. So there's no greater feeling than standing on property that you actually own. The sad part about it is that sometimes you actually own it, that sometimes it can actually be taken away from you. And sometimes it's not always because of something that you did or did not do. It could be because of something that the state deemed to be more appropriate. Now, I myself, I'm not the youngest person, but I'm maybe not the oldest either. But I grew up where I saw this picture of cotton surrounding me where I lived at. And I had the opportunity to go out and pick cotton. I spent about 2 whole hours picking cotton one day, and that's the extent of my cotton experience. Because as a kid, I saw the benefit of it as an adult, but as a child, I didn't see the benefit of it. All I saw was just a lot of substantial amount of work, and some work that I did not want to do. Or you may have grew up, you may have seen rows and rows of soybeans. Now, again, not knowing what the benefit of it was to our particular family or to families in general, but we saw it as a number of work. But what a greater feeling to be able to go out there and stand in a field that you actually produced, and the soybeans looking just this beautiful, and you know it was soon to be harvested because it actually belongs to you, and it belongs to you and your family. Because you, again, you know what that's going to mean to your family's health and well-being. Or you may have grew up to where you actually had hogs you were feeding out. It was a part of your family plan to grow pigs out, because again, as a kid, I really didn't know that we were poor kids. I knew there's some things that I did not have, but I did not think that we were poor, because all the things that we needed was actually taken care of right there on the farm. We got a chance to see all the meat that we needed, all the, was it the hogs or the goats or the chickens, all those things were readily available to us. Even when it comes to needing beef, we had a small cow herd. So we got to a point we needed some extra income, take a cab to the sale barn. Or we needed meat for the freezer, we take a cab and have it slaughtered. Because again, we provided ourselves everything we need in our home. Even you may have grew up where we call it a home garden, but it was such a large piece of property. It actually was like a field where we spent a substantial amount of time creating those products that we consume for ourselves. And then we always had more than we needed. So we provided a lot more to our friends, our neighbors, and to our relatives, because that's what people did back in the day when I was growing up. We shared all the things that we produced on our farm. Or you may have been in a place where you grew up, you had chickens or roosters in your yard, where you actually feed them out again, because you got to a point of knowing that eventually one of those items was going to provide you some eggs. We call them in the country eggs. We always thought that they made the best cakes and the best pies. I'm not sure about that, but it was a known thought that brown eggs you got out the country did better in terms of baking. Or you may have got to the point of realizing that sometimes those barnyard chickens became dinner. So you have to prepare those things for the dining room table. But all of these things I'm mentioning here not only help you to remember the past of your growing up and what the land meant to you as a child, and what it meant to your parents and your relatives, but we want to try and get to a point that we are comfortable in knowing that this land is not going to be taken away from us, that we've done everything in our power to make sure that it stays within our family. Even at a point of preparing hogs, we have a time during a certain time of year that we prepare hogs for ourselves, for our neighbors, for our kin. It became like a community event. We would kill hogs together a certain time of year, and we divvy up all of the chops, the legs, the feet, the chitlins, and so forth to all of our family members. Again, we were just trying to share what we actually grew. All of this ties back into how important that land and agriculture meant to not only just to one person, but what it meant to a community. And even today, people are now still consuming chitlins. Back in the day, we actually cleaned them, prepared them for the table. But again, they may be a little hard to fathom today, but it was a substantial part of our heritage. And then you may have gotten to the point to where your father or your grandfather or your other relatives have gotten to the point in life that they cannot able to function anymore because of their age and because of their health. They always believe that the land don't know color. The land never mistreated us. There's always was people mistreating us. But how great a feeling is it to stand on property that belongs to you? But you got to make sure that you do everything in your power to maintain that land so that it's not taken away from you because of some simple things. And we do know land has been taken away from a number of years, and it's still done so today through a number of different ways. So, but we got to the age of realizing that land had been taken from us because we've been tricked out of it, manipulating senior citizens about their land, purchasing percentages, people not paying taxes on their property, interstate succession, adverse possession, eminent domain, family not getting along, and family just not communicating with each other. And we're going to go through most of these in my presentation here. So, and then we've gotten to the point that we have allowed our elderly to leave this world and not, as we say in the country, get our business fixed. So we did not find ourselves in this position here. So then people are now trying to figure out who's going to do what, who's going to take care of the farm, who wants the farm, who's going to manage it, who's responsible for it, who's going to pay the taxes, and all these decisions are now, while you're grieving, you're now also trying to figure out all the answers to these decisions, and it's be difficult to do it all at this time frame. So we want to talk a little bit about how to prepare to keep your land, how to maintain it without having to be placed in a position to where the land can easily be taken away or misuse. So then once the person has passed away and they have no real true owner or manager of the farm, it started looking just like this. It started to sit idle. Nobody's doing anything to it. Nobody's taking care of the farm. The animals start being sold off one by one. Then you set yourself up for a position to where the land now becomes heir property. And it comes to heir property, basically just land that's been passed down from one generation to the next without a will or an estate plan. It becomes what is called tenancy in common, which means that everybody, all the heirs, pretty much have an ownership interest in that particular property, which makes it quite difficult to do anything with your land. What it does also too, it minimizes what kind of programs you can apply for, because again, you need to be able to go out and get control of the property to qualify to get a FSA farm ID number, which then puts you in a position to qualify for all of those USDA programs. What should I say? Qualify to apply for those programs. And so then you will be able to get assistance from UAPB, the gentlemen that are working as contractors and so on, can assist you with applying for those programs and services. But again, though, there's some things that you need to do on your part. Because again, though, heir property is basically land that's when the owner has actually passed away and they did not have a will or estate plan, and that land goes to their particular children's. And then all of the children become heirs to that particular property. And when you don't transfer the property through a will or estate plan, the number of heirs get larger and larger and larger. I had a woman in one of my classes. She had about 232 heirs to one piece of property. That's because the land kept passing on and on without no one getting control of it and then transferring the property without a will or estate plan. So, but luckily in Arkansas, you guys passed the Uniform Petition Property Act back in 2015. So which again, you guys are quite ahead of the curve. So you have an opportunity to see the benefits of having this act passed in your state. And then you've also had some time to go through and re-examine it and to make some modifications so that it could be the best fit for your state. So we start talking about the Property Act. First, that establishes a hierarchy of remedies that both reinforces the property rights to co-tenants and improve their ability to retain the real estate. It gives co-tenant automatic buyout rights. It addresses real substance to statute preferences for petition in kind or opposed for by sale. But it also reforms the sale process to improve chance of co-tenants to maximize their share of the proceeds, pretty much, in terms of helping you to getting the most out of the land. And even if you decide to sell, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of that particular property. So what is heir property? This is your Arkansas Code, basically 1860, 1002. What it then says that at least one co-tenant must have acquired the title from a relative, which means it's going to be transferred from one property of adult person to the next. It doesn't necessarily have to be from parent to child. It could be from parent to child. It could be from child to parent. It could be from sibling to another sibling. But it has to be through a relative, pretty much a descendant or collateral, even an individual otherwise related to the person who actually owned the property in the beginning. But it doesn't necessarily have to transfer from parent to child. Depending on your tree format in your particular state, in terms of if a person that have a will, who they go to next? Do they go to the children? They don't have children. Do they go to the siblings next? Do they go to the parents or uncle? Just depending on what state you're actually in. But you also have to have, at least in terms of the rule, 20% or more of interest may be held to go for relatives. 20% or more interests are held by one co-tenant who acquired it from another relative, or 20% or more co-tenant, again, from another relative. So how do you become an heir? Again, the landowner died without a will. The heir will own the land as tenancy in common. They have said that the person has passed away or has died in the state. Each heir has divided right to possession of the whole tract. Each heir can transfer his or her shares by deed, by will, or trust. And if the heir dies by the will, then the heir share will automatically go to his or her heirs or offspring. So an heir share could be quite small, yet it could be many tenants in common on tract. So again, it does depend on. So
I think when I.
So it does depend on the number of times the property has actually been transferred without a will, and how many kids or offspring there actually are. because again, they'll be passed to a generation of 5 kids, and one of them passed away, then that particular child that actually had kids, his kids now come to the fore. Say if he had 5 children, and one of the 5 children had 5 kids. So then one of the people that had 5 passed away, so now there's 9 heirs to the piece of property. And it just goes on. And it could keep going. And we don't want you to try to put something in place like a will or estate plan, because it gets more and more difficult to try and get control of the property, because you're going to have to get everyone pretty much to try and buy in to transfer the property over, or to try and sell that property to the other co-tenants. So you get to a point now where some co-tenants may decide they want to buy a portion of the property from the other co-tenants. So the first thing you have to do is try to figure out what is the farm market value, and it must be determined by the court. And then the court will in turn, so once you decide you want to be the person to buy out the other co-tenants or a portion of it, then the court's going to look at notifying all the other co-tenant owners and their interest into the property. But it can be bought. You could buy one person's interest, or you could look at trying to buy the entire piece of property. So a good example would be, say for instance, you had Anthony and Brenda who wish to sell a portion of their property. Anthony and Carol and David do not. So you're looking at 4 kids: Anthony, Brenda, Carol, and David. So, but what if Anthony and Brenda, they pretty much own about 1/6 interest in the property, but then Carol and David each holds a 1/3 interest in the property. The property gonna be valued at about $300,000. So what is going to happen there is that since Anthony and Brenda wish to sell, the court is going to notify Carol and David that this property is for sale and see if they actually want to buy it after they go out and find what is the true farm market value for that particular property. And once they do that, those particular people, Carol and David, they have about 45 days to notify the court if they wish to purchase the property from Anthony and Brenda. So it's kind of almost like the right of first refusal to some degree. Because again, though, you go into to other co-tenants first to see if they want to buy the property, and the court's going to step in and do that once they find out the farm market value of the property. Then they have about 45 days to approach the court and notify them whether they wish to buy that property or not. So, all right. So when can the Uniform Petitioning and Property Act apply? So first and foremost, again, they have to first be determined that it is air property. When it means air property, again, it means a real property held in tenancy in common that satisfies all other requirements that are in petition. First thing it had to be is that if there's no agreement in records binding all of the tenants between a government partition of the property. B, one or more of the co-tenants acquired title from a relative were living or deceased. C, basically end of the file, we still again come back to about the percentages. 20% or more of the interest can be held by a co-tenant, which is considered as a relative. 20% or more of the interests are held by an individual who acquired title from a relative. Then 20% or more of the co-tenant that are actually relatives. This law basically is found in your 1862, 1002. But once you determine that the property is actually air property, then and only then will your Uniform Petitioning and Property Act can be applied to the property. And the second thing is that the court must appoint a commissioner, but the commissioner cannot have any ready interest in the property or be related to it to be a part of the suit in any way whatsoever. Then third, the court must determine what the fair market value is. It's not not at the auction, but in terms of what the property is actually worth before the actual sale. Then after market value is also determined by the tenant will be notified of the fair market value given the option to buy of the co-tenant. What they're going to do is called a before and after. They want to make sure the property is actually see what the value is before they actually sell the property. Then they also want to see what the property value will actually be once it's actually been sold to a third party. This will actually be done prior to the property being sold to the other co-tenants. If not all interests are purchased, so basically you don't necessarily have to buy all of the interest in terms of the property. So then the court again will step in and will notify the other co-tenants exactly what their portion would be and what is the new position they will actually hold in terms of who will be their co-tenants on that particular property. Okay. We're going to move to eminent domain. Now, eminent domain basically is the inherent right of the state to seize a person's private property without their consent. Basically, what it is, the state has the authority to be able to take somebody's property without the owner basically liking the idea. But there's a couple things that the state must comply with in order to be able to take the property. But it is a state initiative. Now, say for instance, if a company comes in like Nissan, like a car manufacturer, now the Nissan would not be the eminent domain requester. It would actually be the state on behalf of a company like Nissan. Because again, the state has to prove that it is going to be something that's actually needed by the citizens of the state of Arkansas. So basically what they want to do is approach individual and have to prove that it's going to be for the benefit of the community, in terms of the number of jobs that it may bring to that particular state, that the land that actually be utilized, that is the appropriate land for them to be able to put this particular business in there, and that it is not for the benefit of a third party like Nissan, but it's really for the benefit of the citizens of the state of Arkansas. Now, if they comply with those initiatives, then they will be able to apply for eminent domain. Now, when a company decides to approach the state about eminent domain, the citizens who actually own the land, they will not be notified for some time frame. You say for instance, if Nissan want to come to Arkansas, they will start pretty much like 2, 3 to 5 years ahead of time, put all of that ducks in a row. So when they do come to the state of Arkansas to approach those families about that land, they will already know what direction they're going to be going in. They already know what kind of value they want to be able to pay for the land. They also will know exactly how people own the land, that it's the best piece of property in the state of Arkansas. They even know that how many jobs it's going to provide. They want to know all of the tax break that they're going to get by coming to the state of Arkansas. All these things will be known ahead of time. The great thing about Arkansas is that when it comes to eminent domain, you guys are in a great position, because when it comes to eminent domain, one thing you have to give you is what is called just compensation. Now, just compensation is a great and wonderful thing, because what it does that in Arkansas, they will actually have to pay you not only just for what your property is actually worth, they will also pay you for what is called an inconvenience fee, I call it. Because back in September 25th, 1789, and it was ratified in December 15, 1781, this is the Fifth Amendment. If you look at the screen in the red, there says that properties without due process of law says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This was known back in 1791, that the state will actually have the ability to take land from its citizens. And it already then talked about just compensation, would it mean that not only would they pay you for what the land is actually worth, you would be compensated beyond it at least 10 to 20% more than what the land is actually worth, because you would have to be, to say inconvenient, because you have to start all back over again, buy new land, buy a new location to put a house up and so forth. So you guys are way ahead of the curve again in the state of Arkansas when it comes to eminent domain, as well as the Uniform Petition and Property Acts. So again, most states do not use this, but in Arkansas it does what is called the before and after method to determine your just compensation. So again, as a property owner is entitled to the difference in the value of his or her entire property immediately before, taking the value of the remaining property immediately after the taking as a proposed project is completed and in place. Again, they're gonna look at what the land was actually valued at prior to, but they're also gonna look at what the land value is going to be after they sell that particular property, or the state takes it over in eminent domain, and then you'll be paid accordingly. That's why it's so important to know your rights, because when a company comes in and utilize eminent domain, they're going to come in with a stack or a slew of attorney, maybe 10. You have to go to court. You may not be able to afford one like me. You want to make sure that you know the full extent and value of your property and know what your rights are. There's a situation that happened here in the state of Mississippi. There was an elderly lady who actually had a home out in the, maybe right outside of town. They were going to build a gas line at the back of her property. But the gas line was too close to her home, so they basically approached her about buying her out. And the great thing about this particular situation is that the elderly lady had a son who was an attorney, and he was able to go out and to be able to get her the appropriate amount of money to pay off her current home and to get her a new home built in town. He also was able to have it fully furnished, a two-story house, to a two-car garage, a brand new car in the driveway, and also she had left it with money in the bank. Again, though, because she didn't have to pay an attorney, but they also knew the extent of what her property is actually worth and what her property is going to be worth to that particular gas company. So it's very, very important when it comes to eminent domain that you have somebody who knows the process when it comes to dealing with attorneys and companies and the state to make sure that you are appropriately compensated for your property. Some of you may be familiar with the Bryant family there in Arkansas. This particular group, this particular family, were basically had some difficulties with a seed company there in the state of Arkansas. Basically, they had honestly went out, purchased seeds, and was planting the seeds, and they found out later that the seeds that they were replaced with were not the appropriate seeds that they initially had asked for or paid for. So they ended up having a horrible year in terms of planting. So we have to be mindful, though, in terms of not only in terms of mindful about rights in terms of how we own our land, but in terms of the companies and organizations that we actually work with, in terms of how we are so trusting of them when it comes to do what we do to carry out our businesses. Now I know we can't be liberal of everyone, but when it comes to owning your land, maintaining your land, and knowing that people are out there trying to take your property from you because they see the value in it, sometimes they do things to you that are necessary, legal or even right or even justly because they want their particular property. In my own family, I had an aunt who actually owned 200 acres. She owned the land outright. She wasn't paying rent on it or anything. She was allowing somebody to be able to plow and plant crops on her particular farm. Before my aunt passed away, she was actually working with an attorney who was not necessarily an attorney who was a friend of the family. Before my aunt passed away, she was still living in the house, but she was paying rent for the house and she was actually paying rent for the land that she's actually was living on. Now, she used to own it, but she got tricked out of it by that attorney who ended up got her to sign her land over to him. So she ended up leaving this world with renting property she used to already own, as well as the land and the house, because she got tricked out of it. So again, we talk about manipulating senior citizens. That still is a big factor, not just at yesteryears, but current years. So I mentioned earlier in 2015 that you guys have already passed the Uniform Petition Era Property Act there in Arkansas back in 2015. But in 2018, the Farm Bill that actually passed made it a lot easier, not just for states like Arkansas, but several other states in terms of making it a lot easier for states to be able to allow people who actually have air property to be able to get control of their property by not having all the heirs to sign up on that documentation to give control interest to one individual. Because again, that will allow you to get a certain percentage of owners or co-tenants in the property to sign off and give somebody control of it. Then with that, you're able to take that as well as documentation in terms of paying taxes and so forth, and to be able to qualify to get a farm ID number, again, from Farm Service Agency. And then you're able to apply for programs and services from FSA, NRCS, Risk-Based Agency, and so forth. But again, the first step is getting control of the property. Now, sometimes when it comes to people breaking up and having air property among siblings or co-tenants or co-owners, a lot of times it's kind of difficult to get everybody on the same page. Now, if you have siblings, nobody get on the same page in terms of how they want to use the property, how they want to control it, to farm it, or to get the taxes paid and so forth. There's an organization called the Federation of Southern Cooperatives that are housed out of Atlanta, Georgia. And what they've done in the last Farm Bill, they have provided what is called a mediation clause in the Farm Bill. So through it, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives have put on their payroll what is called a mediator specialist. And Ms. LaTanya Toomer is here in Mississippi, but I'm sure they cross different states. So if you have issues that you need somebody else to come in and try to help solve mediation between siblings or family members about getting control of the property, you can contact Latonya Toom at this address and phone number there below, or you can contact the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. They can assist you with providing someone to help you work out your difficulties. Because again, though, until you get control of that property, there's very little you're going to be able to do with it in terms of getting control, getting the farm ID number, and then be able to apply for those federal programs and services. So when it comes to our property and land is UNESCO territory control, when you pass away, without a will or estate plan, it says you have passed away interstate. So then the property that you actually own, the land, will go to your relatives, and it is, they were called heirs. So then property become heir property. And as long as it's considered heir property, in the general term, there's a very limited amount of things you can do to be able to do anything with that property. Then the land was set idle, which means you set yourself up for land to be taken away from you through adverse possession, or you may call them squatter. Maybe able to squat on your property and then apply for title to that property. And so you definitely don't want that to happen. So what you need to know when it comes to our property that, or try to do, first thing you know, there's an issue between you and your family members, is try and have a joint conversation with your family to get them to get on the same page before it become a legal battle. Hopefully, because some people may just be in it for the money. Some people may be living in other states who don't know anything about the land, who may just be willing to sell it or just come to some kind of consensus. But that would be the first thing I would do, is try to get everybody on the same page. And then too, once that happened, I will also try and get everybody to start putting together wills, not just wills for that particular piece of property, get all of your heirs to start putting together wills to alleviate from more and more heir property from happening. And basically, if you're at least 18 years of age and have at least $10, I would encourage you to put a will together. Even if you are a husband and wife, I would encourage you both to have two separate wills. As I understand, attorneys basically say that it's kind of difficult to try and manage one will with the husband and wife. I mean, you can set it up to where what the wife has is transferred to the husband, or the husband transferred to the wife. But I would recommend that you do two separate wills to make it a lot easier when it comes to distributing your property to the next generation. Then too, when it comes to our property, you need to also figure out what exactly is your family tree. Because again, though, Arkansas may be a little different from Mississippi in terms of how your property is going to be transferred to your offspring, to your siblings, depending on if you have kids or not. You can say if you have brothers and sisters or siblings, or if your parents are still alive. But you first need to know exactly what your family tree is in terms of who would actually receive the property if your parents have passed away, or who would actually receive your property, whether it be your kids or so forth. Then I would actually, once you establish all the identity of all of the relatives and all the heirs, and I will actually create a plan of actually who's going to take care of the property. Because everybody may not have the knowledge of how to make sure the property is actually maintained, or make sure that the calves are sold, calves are worked, the hay fields are okay, or paying taxes, or basically a full knowledge of the records being kept and so forth. All those decisions need to be made and it be understood so that everybody who's a co-tenant, a co-owner in the property will know. Because some people might just say, well, just send me my check every month or every quarter or maybe once a year. They may be fine with that. But again, you need to know, need to be understood, and then they need to have it written down someplace. And then I would also look at trying to recommend meeting maybe once or twice a year. Most individuals have family units. There'll be a great time to come together to discuss the home place or discuss the land that's actually being owned by heirs or co-tenants. Because again, there's some disadvantages when you pass away interstate, because again, though, all heirs will have an equal claim to the property, regardless of whether you're paying taxes or not. It still be owned by all of the individuals. You put yourself in a position for not having access to federal program. Even adopted children will have access to that property. And then too, eminent domain could be eminent domain, but yeah, eminent domain as well as adverse possession will be more likely to happen because no one is actually managing the property and it's just sitting idle. So then you can actually, people start squatting on that property. talk about adverse possession, which is the ARC code there in Arkansas, which is 1811106. Basically, adverse possession, or another term would be, is a squatter. Basically, is someone who basically claims that they have occupied the land for at least 7 years continuously in Arkansas. But again, though, it has to be continuously for 7 exact years. So then the squatter will come to you and approach your land. One thing you can actually do to alleviate from them applying is that if you have some type of written document that doesn't have to be formal, it just could be a document that shares in terms of what a person is allowed to do on the property. You get them permission. That will alleviate them being able to qualify for paying, for claiming adverse possession. Or if you're paying taxes, they would not be allowed to qualify for paying adverse possession. And then again, it has to be for at least 7 consecutive years. And it must be the same exact person that was using it for those 7 years that actually to apply for that land. We're not just talking about farmland. We could be your front yard in terms of somebody moving the fence over, well, over inches or over, over this little piece at the same time frame that could even apply. I don't care if your neighbors and you are maybe on the same page, you get along well, and they've been using for a number of years, but what happens if you and your neighbor fall out? And the quickest thing they think of to get back at you will be to go in and apply for adverse possession to your property. So all this is doing is just trying to help you to alleviate situations and circumstances that could actually happen to you, to alleviate some fighting amongst friends, neighbors, and relatives, and so forth. So in order to be adverse possession, some basic guidelines that must be the actual possession of the land, which means that if that person who applied for adverse possession, our squatters, it must be that same exact person physically using that particular property. Must be possession must be not divided into terms of period. Again, it must be 7 consecutive straight years with them occupying that particular property. Hostile would mean that they do not have permission or hasn't been given to them, which means they'll be occupying just like the land belongs to them. Nobody gave them the right to use that property. Then in terms of open and notorious would mean they have not been trying to hide the property. They drive out there like it belongs to them. They camp out there on the property like that it belongs to them. They may put a trailer on it, just use it just like it belongs to them, which means they're not trying to hide, which means they are open and notorious. Then exclusive possession would mean that it has to be the same exact person using their property for that particular time frame. And then color of title, this is what they will go in and apply for if they meet those other 5 criteria, which is mean they really do not have substantive paperwork to prove they are the legitimate owner to that piece of property. But again, though, just a simple document written between one person and the next that says you gave them permission, that will help to alleviate adverse possession. Then when it comes to farm lease agreement, it's very, very important when you establish a lease agreement between you and someone else, that this is just a simple format you actually use. One thing it has to have, in entirety, it has to have the place, date, time of year, the address, who the landowner is, who the tenant would actually be, the county and the state that actually will be in, the terms of the lease, there are crops to be on there, the type of crops, the number of acres, what you'll be paying and how you'll be paying, if you're paying by the acre or you're renting just the entire property as a overall, and the total that you're required to pay you, but it's done quarterly or biannually or even annually. All those things need to be in your particular agreement. And then too, one thing I always suggest to people that actually have agreements between you and anybody else, make sure there's no blank space between where you sign your name and the last paragraph on that particular document. We've actually seen that people have gone back in, has typed in additional line above their signature that says that after so many years, that property would turn back over to the leaser. So in order, you can easily alleviate that by make sure there's no space there on those agreements or application by putting X's above your name or writing big. Just don't alleviate or leave empty spaces on documents, because again, though, you set yourself up for people to be able to pull something underhanded as related to stealing your property. And most people when they see the word trespassing, legal duty, or visitor, they look at this list and say, well, do I have a responsibility to protect these individuals on my property? They say, well, if somebody visit my property, well, sure. I want to protect the people that visit my property because they may be friends or family members. Then what about the legal duty of somebody come on your property to check your water, or the mailman, or people of that nature? You may feel, yeah, I have a legal duty to protect those people. I probably want to. Then you say somebody's trespassing. Well, no, I didn't give them permission to be on my property. They really have no real legitimate reason to be on my property. And then why in the world should I be responsible for the trespasser in terms of their health and well-being? Are you responsible for protecting a trespasser the same way you're responsible for a person who has a legal duty to be on your property? Or are you responsible for a person as well as their visit on your property? The answer is yes, and the answer is no. In Arkansas, if a trespass is discovered, meaning that the landowner knew of that the individual or others using the property without permission, then it is the landowner must act within ordinary care. It means that the landowner must protect the known trespasser from reasonable forcible harm, such as tripping over an obstacle on a path leading to the front door. Simply what it's saying, that if you know for a fact that some people are trespassing on your property, then you could be liable for that person's health and well-being in terms of preparing your farm to alleviate people from being hurt on your property. Now, if you don't know people are trespassing on your property, then you likely will not be totally liable. But if you know if people are trespassing and it can be proved that you knew that they were trespassing before and you don't do anything to keep them off, then you could possibly be liable. What it's going to be asking you if you go to court is all reasonable efforts. Did you do everything within your power to prevent the trespassers from coming on your property? And if not, did you do everything in your power to protect those people on your property from being hurt in terms of tripping over obstacles or letting your implements down on your tractors, lock your cabin doors, and putting away chemicals and so forth? All those things you could possibly be liable for whether you're trespassing, a legal obligation there, or somebody there as a visitor. But all determined in terms of your knowledge of these people being on your property or not will make the case in terms of whether you're liable or not for those three different entities. And when it comes to land and property rights and knowing what your rights are and how important land means to you and your family, the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that you try and maintain your property, because your land is not just going to be yours, because you hope that one day it's substantially stable, so that one day you'll be able to transfer it over not just to your children's, but then the Bible talks about to your children's children, and talks about an inheritance. It's one thing to transfer stories and history, but stories and history does not move your offspring and your children's children to the next level in terms of wealth, because we always want our children's children to be better off than we are financially, yes, but also in terms of knowledge and understanding of how to live, how to cope, and how to maneuver in this world, physically, financially, as well as socially. And this basically is a disclaimer that, again, though, since I travel quite a bit between several different states, I'm not fully abreast of all the laws and regulations for each of the states, because right now I'm doing Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. So, but to the best of my knowledge, I tried to put together information that are for Arkansas. So again, though, I would also recommend that if you are looking at doing a will or estate plan, even to just try to figure out what your rights are as relate to your land ownership, I would definitely seek out the legitimate, responsible person who is certified in the area to help you to keep control of your land, to help you to maintain it, and also to help you prepare for the next generation. Thank you. And I will open it up for questions if there many might be.
Yes, thank you so much for that information. We do have several questions. So there's several questions from Ms. Gunter. And so the first one is, are minors counted as heirs?
It would be, but when the court transfer that property, it's not going to be it'll be transferred to them, but also be transferred to their guardian or whoever they have set up to be that child, who is responsible for that particular child. because the child really won't have access to the, well, it depends on the state, but usually they don't have access to it until they're like age 18. So that we will be transferred into that child's name, but also in the care of that particular adult. And also too, to add to that, is that when you start looking at doing your will or your estate plan, especially if a person with young children, they need to have we call a guardian, or that we do in the Black church, we call them, godparents. You need to go ahead and decide on if something should happen to you and your wife, or decide on to happen to the only parent, is to go ahead and appoint a person to take care of your children's. Do it legally in a signed appropriate legal document and transfer those kids. But also, I would also recommend that you would create a life insurance policy to go to that particular guardian to help them to be able to financially take on your child. Because again, though, they won't get have access to the child, well, until they're like 18. But as a guardian, you'll be responsible for adding on that new expense of feeding, clothing, and educating that particular child at that particular moment that the person have actually passed away. But they would be into the child, but in care of that particular adult until the kid returns at least 18.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Perry. He says, what if I'm the only taxpayer on the record for the last 8 years? I have 2 co-tenants who are not paying. Does that offset payment due if I buy them out?
Well, if they're willing to sell it to you, that would be perfect. You really don't have any problem. The problem comes in when people don't want to sell that portion of the property because they don't want to let go of the property because they think that you're going to make some more money off the end. If you can go ahead and buy them out, that's ideal. But when it comes to the person who's been paying the taxes, because of the laws that actually have passed recently, you can get control of the property, but you won't necessarily own the property. But you'll get control of it, where you can get the farm ID number and be able to apply for those federal programs. But again, though, it still be owned by you and those co-tenants. But I would recommend, like you said, I would go and contact those other co-tenants. If they will to sell, I would buy them out as soon as possible. And right now, too, in the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, they did put money in there in the Farm Bill that go to the states, to the USDA Farm Service Agency. And that particular agency is going to look at finding organizations in that particular state to give that money to. And then that organization will help provide funding to heirs or co-tenants to help them to solve those heir property issues. So I'm not sure if I would contact FSA and see if they have provided funding to a third party in the state, and to see if they can provide you assistance if you needed financial assistance to help you to get those things done. But I would also to look at organizations in the state. In Mississippi, there's a Mississippi Center for Justice. There may be one in Arkansas as well. They've actually have started this in the month of January, providing some free assistance to lender resource clientele in the state to help them get those heir property issues resolved. At you only fee you actually pay will be, the court fee and things of that nature. But in terms of the basic services that the justice system actually provide, those things are provided free.
Okay, so speaking of court systems, the next question is, will the courts help find heirs that are spread out all over the country?
No.
They will not. And so that's going to be up to you. But I would recommend finding an attorney to help you do that. But again, though, there's going to be a window of time for them to go out and look and search for people. I know some people right now, they've been looking for a number of years, and the person doesn't really want to be found.
Mm-hmm.
But attorney will be the ideal person, because they will have the tools and techniques and the process known to go through from where a person used to live, where they used to work, and things of that nature. You get them all that information that you know to that attorney, and you will have to pay them, of course, and they will try and track down those individuals for a window of time. I think that's the best way, because again, though, if you really know your tree, I provide that information to your attorney and let them do the work. All of this is going to cost, but again, though, through the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, they've actually placed money into those states to assist you with doing these type of things. So I would definitely, again, see if FSA in the state of Arkansas gave that money out to an entity, and see if the entity could provide you that grant assistance to help you get your air property issue resolved.
Okay, and then I think we have time for another question. And then if you could look at the chat, I think there may be one or two more if you can respond to after your session. Okay, so the next question is dealing with putting land in entities. And so is it recommended that families put the land into a trust or a LLC or something like that to better manage the land as the number of heirs grow?
Well, let me say this, since I'm not a certified financial advisor, but the gentleman that I speak with on a regular basis, he recommend to put their property into LLC. I'm sorry, into a trust.
A trust, yeah.
Trust, right. The LLC will be ideal for your farm business, but when you start talking about land, to make sure that it's actually protected, a trust will be a better ideal way to go. But in terms of trying to make sure your farm business is a legitimate business and to be able to qualify for a lot of the benefits that LLC can provide as a business, that'll be a good route to go to look at an LLC for your farm enterprise.
All right, very good. I always learn something new, no matter how many of these outreach sessions I attend. Even being on the team, I always learn something new. So thank you so much for your time and for the
Candy,
information that you shared with everybody.
Candy, I have a quick question. This is Ted Carter. So the resources that Dr. Reed was talking about, the FSA having a fund set aside to work for air property issues, is that something that you guys can chase down there in Arkansas to see if there is a similar service or funds in Arkansas like he was referring to in Mississippi?
Yes, sir. We will check. Tonight, Miss Rhonda Ogwin, she was not able to attend. She is the outreach coordinator for Farm Service Agency.
Okay.
But I will find out that information and I'll follow up with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Would you
All right,
be able to, I'm sorry, I had just one more quick question. Would you be able to share that information about the FSA in the presentation when you email it out to everybody?
Sure, I will, and it's not just in Mississippi. It was a part of the 2018 Farm Bill, so each state should actually have access to it. What I'll do, I'll make sure I clearly explain it in my PowerPoint presentation. Then I'll provide it to UAPB, and they'll be able to send it out to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Reed.
You're quite welcome.
To our attendees, if you all have any further questions or you think of something else, just type it in the chat. And there's several of the staff members, we're keeping them on family, that are still on, as well as the speakers. I think they will be available until the end of this workshop. So feel free to type your questions in and we will get to them. All right.
Can I say something quickly?
Yes.
Those of you may have further questions for me, I'm gonna give you my email address because I have to get off because I have to do another presentation on another Zoom in about 15 minutes. My email address is areed, which is AREED at Alcorn. Well, tell you what, I'll put it in chat and you guys can just send me an email and I'll respond back to you.
That'll be perfect.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so our next speaker is Mr. Joe Fran, and he's going to talk about forestry management. He is the UAPB Keeping the Family Program Forester. And then he's also the Executive Director of the Arkansas Department of Agriculture Board of Registration. Mr. Fran.
Hey, Yvette, actually is Justin is next. And he's going to talk about forestry management. I'm sorry, that's why I thought I gave you correct agenda. So it's Justin next.
No, ma'am, it's good. It's all good. I know how to roll with it. Justin, you're up. Justin, Justin Mallett. He is the county forester for the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. Justin, when you get on, would you please also tell everyone the counties that you work in, and then if you would go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
All right, so I cover, can everybody hear me? Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, good. Want to make sure before I start talking silently to the screen. I cover Polk, Howard, and Sevier counties down in southwest Arkansas. So if y'all don't know where those counties are, it's kind of south and west in Arkansas, about halfway between Texarkana and Fayetteville, I guess it would be. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about forest management. And I'm going to run through it real quick. That way we have time for questions if there are any, and that way we give plenty of time for questions for the other presenters. So, so the first thing many of you may know, if you're not already familiar with it, what is forest management? So forest management is managing timberland for specific goals. It's also maintaining your timberland, and it is actively doing, because if you're not doing something, you're not managing it. So doing something is part of the management process. It's also planning activities. So in the beginning steps of managing your timber, there's several questions you need to ask yourself or your family or your family. So first thing is, what are your goals? Is your goals timber, wood, money, investment? Is your goal recreation, hiking, camping, hunting, forest bathings? Is your goal wildlife habitat, bird, deer, and endangered species, such as this turtle? Or is the ultimate goal just to keep the property in your family and to create a place for all or most of and for all the people in your family to meet? So once you decide all that, then you need to look at, what do you have? Do you have trees, shrubs, and bushes? What size are they? How old are they? What kind of quality are they in? Do you have hardwood or pine? What's the species composition? What quality timber do you have? Do you have that Ferrari or do you have that Yugo? Also, how do I find out this information? By using like a consulting forester or someone like me. And another important thing is, how much is my property worth? How much is my timber worth? So once you start working on all this, one of the best things to do to start out with is you need to start out with a plan. And you may ask, why do I need a plan? A plan is a lot like having that recipe in your cookbook. You need to know all your ingredients. You need to know what you need to do with those ingredients. You need to know when you need to do that with those ingredients. So in the end, you have a nice, beautiful cake and not just a bowl of flour. How do you get a plan? You can get a plan through a county forester such as myself. You can get a plan through a consulting forester. Either one of those can do it. How much does it cost? When you go through a county forester, those management plans are free. There are also programs that will pay a consultant forester as long as the money is available. So most of the time, a plan is going to be free. Other times, timber managers may charge a percentage of the sale to cover the cost of that plan. What if I don't understand it? A management plan is only worth the paper it is on if you have no idea what it means. So if you don't understand it, ask questions. Don't just take it and feel like, I don't understand this. This guy's speaking forestry ease. Ask questions. If you know somebody knowledgeable that you're comfortable with, ask them questions. Working with your neighboring landowner that actively manages timbers, they can be a great asset. But in the end, whoever writes you the plan, they're a good resource to reach to. And I'll speak from experience. If you get a plan from me and you don't understand it, ask me, because what that can do is for the future, that can help me improve my plans for future landowners. So don't feel bad about asking. One of the attendees here tonight, he says all the time, I don't know what I don't know. So go ahead and ask and do not feel bad about it. How do you get to all these steps? You can hire professional help, or you can work with professional help, such as myself. You can use silvicultural activities to get your property to that end goal. Silvicultural activities is just a $10 word for managing your timber. You also have to consider cost whenever you're doing that. Some activities cost money, some activities make money. So you need to weigh those in your decision process for getting to the ultimate goal. And then I mentioned plans a while ago. You got to use those plans. They're going to be your best step. So professional help. You can get professional help, such as through myself and my county foresters that I work with. You can also get it through Joe Friend. I don't want to leave Joe out because Joe meets with so many landowners and he works with so many landowners. And Joe can do many things that I can't because I'm limited by my job. You can also hire a consultant forester or a registered forester. I stress forester in the state of Arkansas because foresters, in order to call themselves foresters, have to be a registered forester in the state of Arkansas. So they have to pass a test. They are held by ethics. They are held by many other guidelines. They also have to do continuing education. So please use those people because that's the reason why the system is set up. So your silvicultural activities, I'm going to touch right quick on those. So there's harvesting, there's planting, there's timber stand improvement, there's road and trail building, there's prescribed burning, there's planting of food plots or browse, and there's walking or hiking. Each one of these things is an activity, so you're doing something. You're working with your property and you're helping it. Cost, we touched on that earlier. It's either going to cost you money or make you money. Most activities that cost you money will end up making you more money in the long run. So you gotta have to consider that as an investment. I've got this contact information here. I kind of ran through that for time's sake. That way I don't keep y'all on here too long. I know it's late, but if y'all need to contact me, there's my information there. And I know Candy and Miss Karen and Yvette, they all have my information as well. I can even type my email address into the chat if need be. Before I ask for questions, please remember your land is your legacy. The stories you create with your family, that's part of the legacy. The last presenter, he was talking about all the things that people have done. I can say myself, I've done most of those, and I've heard those stories from my family members. And that is one reason why I hold dear the property that my family has passed down to me. So if you have questions, y'all can go ahead with those, if that's all right, Miss Yvette.
Okay, Justin, you have a request to put your first slide up.
Okay, let me jump back to it if I can figure it out. All righty.
She's wanting to know what is
this one?
Timber, yeah, the one about what is timber management.
What is forestry management? Okay. Let's see. Oh, let me go back. There you go. So what is forestry management? Okay. Sorry, let me open up the chat so I can see. Well, I can't.
Yeah, Justin, it's asking that you put that first slide up again. And I think she was saying what the name of it is. Yeah, she just confirmed. She said that's it, and thank you.
Okay, all right.
All right, so if there's not any other questions for Justin, we'll move on. But first, I want to make a point. Justin has his counties that he work in mentioned and listed. However, if you're not in those counties or if you don't have land in that county, it's no problem. We have people who are assigned to work on keeping in the family for all of our program counties. And so it's, if you need to know who your Justin is, you can either request it in chat and I will let you know, or either you can get with myself or Candy or Karen afterwards and we can refer you to your county forester. Okay, so next up, thank you, Justin.
Thank y'all.
All right, so next up we have Mr. Alvin Peer. He's with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. He is the state outreach coordinator, and he's going to talk about NRCS conservation practices. Mr. Peer, you have the floor. I'm not sure if you're muted, but we can't hear you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Good evening.
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir, you're good to go.
All right. Well, good. As I said, again, good evening, everyone. My name is Alvin Peer. I'm the State Outreach Coordinator for NRCS. Do you all see my screen with the side slides, or is it just the full screen?
We can see your side slides.
Okay. Okay. How's that? That better?
Yeah, now it's full screen.
Okay. NRCS, helping people help the land. Conservation is where we begin, using our natural resources to wisely. Producers take steps every day to protect their land. Conservation efforts have become integrated into most producers' portfolios. Producers are driving conservation innovation. Making sense of the alphabet soup starts with a plan. When working with the NRCS employee, one of the first things that you're going to do is identify the resource concerns on your land. By identifying those resource concerns, we're working towards identifying those items that will be effective in your conservation plan. After looking at those and identifying those resource concerns, we're then looking at how do we address those resource concerns? How do we fix the resource issues using either EQIP or programs such as ASEP? The EQIP is known as the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. ASEP is known as the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, or some of the other programs that we have, such as CSP. And from that point, after we fix what those issues are, now we're looking at the continuous improvements on our farm. So we take in consideration a program such as the Conservation Stewardship Program, which is considered the next level of conservation. NRCS utilizes technical assistance, which is that conservation planning process that nothing's required of you other than identifying the resource concerns and identifying what resource concerns might be addressed through certain practices that NRCS involves or has available. Second is financial assistance. Financial assistance is derived from the Farm Bill programs, such as the Environmental Quality Incentive Program or the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. These two programs would be identifying some of those Farm Bill issues and the resource concerns on your land. Through the Natural Resource Conservation Series, there are a number of different funding categories that are identified. The local led conservation is one of those areas. When you think of local led conservation, that's bringing the conservation needs to the community. From that aspect, what we're doing is we're identifying in our local counties what are the major resource concerns that we have that that we want to look at addressing. And those areas are identified at those local led work group meetings. And at that point, that's where they establish where they want to target certain dollars for conservation practices. Next, we have our flagship, which is known as the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The Environmental Quality Incentive Program helps producers with conservation regardless to the type of land use that you currently have. As you can see here, the picture to the left, one of our DCs is talking to a customer that has a poultry operation, and you'll see the boards to the rear of them, which is actually a stacking shed that was installed by NRCS. To the right, another example is flood irrigation. It's potential that NRCS possibly helped install the pipeline to assist with flooding this particular field. The third picture is a picture looking at pasture land. Another practice when we're looking at pasture is biomass planting, so grass planting on that operation. Another practice might possibly be silviculture, where the trees are actually being grazed, the land around the trees are actually being grazed in the forestry land, is another practice. But the Environmental Quality Incentive Practice program actually deals with the whole gamut of practices that are available through the Natural Resource Conservation Service. When looking at programs such as the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, there are different funding categories that are available. If you're considered one of the HU categories, which they are known as socially disadvantaged, limited resource, beginning farmer, or veteran farmer, you have the availability or are eligible for not more than 90% of the cost share associated with the planning, design, material, and equipment for installation. If that contract will not be less than 25% above the applicable rate. Advance payment. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, the advance payment is now identified during the planning process. So when you go through the process of applying for the program, you've actually been ranked for the program, and you've then been called to let you know that you are eligible for a contract through NRCS, you would then have the option to request for an advance payment if you fall under the historically underserved categories that I just identified. Then the advance payments are available for all practices, including vegetative, structural, and management conservation activities and conservation activity plans. The timing of the advance payment is such that the participant can expend the funds within 90 days. NRCS, and I'm gonna restate this one, NRCS does not have the authority to extend the 90-day period for expending the advance payment. Advance payment funds not expended within 90 days must be returned. When thinking of some of the categories that are available, strike force is one of those categories that comes up. When we're looking at keeping it in the family, keeping it in the family is identified through one of our funding categories known as strike force, healthy forest. Often we speak of this program as keeping it in the family, but when you go into our office, you want to make sure that you're being ranked under healthy forest in the strike force healthy forest category as one of those particular options available. just to talk about the 5 steps to assistance. The first step that you identify when going into our office and visiting with some of our staff is identifying what it is that you're looking for. What type of issues are you having on your farm? Identifying, within a map from FSA where your farm is located. Just kind of giving a brief identification of what your concerns are. The second thing that step would be the application process. With the help of NRCS, you would complete an application for that financial assistance program that you're identifying. The third step would be known as eligibility. As part of applying, we'll file paperwork to ensure you're eligible for the assistance. What is that paperwork? Our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, is where we would actually take a customer coming in for the first time to introduce them to the Farm Service Agency. The Farm Service Agency actually is where you start the process, because the first question that we're going to ask, do you have a farm number? Do you have physical control of the land for the 5 years, at least the 3 to 5 years of the contract that you're applying for? Have you had a highly erodible determination made on this particular land? So those questions will be asked once you go over to the Farm Service Agency to help. If you don't have a farm and tract number, the Farm Service Agency will then take the necessary documentation from you to establish a farm and tract number for that parcel of land. The farm and tract number, I always tell people that I consider it just like our Social Security numbers. It's the identifying number for that particular parcel of land. After you've gone through the process of ensuring that all of your documentation is up to date and prepared and ready, and you are physically eligible to apply for the program, the next step would be taking what you did in step 1, where you identify what some of your concerns were, and identifying some of those practices that you want to try to address through our program, identifying the program. And that's where the NRCS ranking process of that application will then occur. Those applications, depending on, are ranked in what we now call CART. CART is the new tool that we utilize to rank our applications. Once you go through that process and you're identified that you're a favorable application for pre-approval, that's when we would then go make that phone call with you to sit down and look at, are you wanting to go the next step for applying for this conservation program? Meaning looking at the practices that you're identifying, looking at the amount that is estimated for that contract, for those practices that you're identifying, and agreeing upon when you would like to start, because you have to apply a practice within the first 12 months of your contract. And that's where that agreement between you and NRCS takes place, and all the physical signing takes place. But I want to also tie back that this contract is an agreement between you and NRCS if you are approved, because you are the one that's installing these practices. So you want to work with that district conservation or soil conservationist to ensure that those practices are identified by the year in which you plan to install those practices. Those contracts are set up where you have 3 to 10 years to complete the last practice. Actually, it's 3 to 9. The last year is normally you work through the final stage of the contract. But that's where you make that decision and that outlay of your contract and how you anticipate fulfilling your part of the agreement. And I'll pause just for a minute there to see if there are any questions about how to apply for NRCS.
Yeah, Mr. Pierre, just a quick question. So is there an amount of land that is too small for this process? For example, is 5 or 6 acres something that you guys can work with, or how does that work?
It depends on what you're doing. It's not because we actually deal with high tunnels, which a high tunnel could go on as small as a half acre or less, depending on the size of that high tunnel. So it's not specifically based off of an acre size.
Okay, thanks. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Any other question before I move to the next slide? Okay. Why invest in conservation? Makes sense. As we look to the future, we see that the complex changing world ahead of us will face challenges that we've never seen before. Right now, we have 7.6 billion people on the planet. In the next 40 years, that number will reach approximately 9.8 billion. By 2100, we're projected to be more than 11 billion. We have a shrinking agricultural land base. Over the past 30 years, we've lost 43 million acres of agricultural land due to developments. Of that, 14 million acres have occurred on prime agricultural soil. Several droughts and floodings are becoming the norm. How we choose to respond today will determine our future. Farmers and ranchers and forest land owners are at the center of these issues. 70% of the land in the lower 48 states is privately owned, and that 1.4 billion acres, private landowners are making decisions every day about how to use the natural resources on their land. When our growing population needs more food, more fuel, and more fiber to survive, American families and people around the world will look to the American producer to deliver. In order to keep with the production in a sustainable way, they will need our support. That's helping people help the land through conservation. Productive lands, healthy environment. If you have more questions for me, my name is Alvin Pierre. I'm the State Outreach Coordinator. My number is 501-92, no, that's the wrong number, 501-301-3112. I'm here as the Arkansas State Outreach Coordinator, and I'm here to serve you as constituents of Arkansas. Thank you. Are there any questions for me? And I believe Corey Cornelius, our EQIP Program Manager, may possibly be online as well.
All right, I am not seeing any questions in the chat. If anyone think of something to ask Alvin or Mr. Cornelius, please feel free to type it in the chat and we'll get your question answered. Thank you for that information, Mr. Pierre.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on. You almost got away, Alvin. Okay, so we just got one. It says, can you mention or can you speak on CRP and the difference between CSP, so Conservation Reserve Program, and the difference between Conservation Stewardship Program?
Okay, the Conservation Reserve Program is a Farm Service Agency program. The Conservation Reserve Program typically works with a producer identifying land that they're taking out of production and possibly putting into a tree or pasture native grass situation. It's determined on if that land is found to be highly erodible, what the present scoring is through that. We typically work with the Forestry Commission when we're doing those plans for CRP. When we look at the Conservation Stewardship Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program is the next step to the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The Conservation Stewardship Program takes in consideration all of the practices that you potentially have utilized through the Environmental Quality Incentive Program to be a good steward of your land. By being a good steward of your land, the Conservation Stewardship Program rewards you for what you're already doing. But at the same time, we're also looking at how do we go to the next level with the conservation practices that are available. So from looking at what you're currently doing on your operation, now we're establishing what the next level will be based off of what you're wanting to do and what practices or bundles that may be available to assist you to the next level of conservation. You actually receive a payment for the stewardship as well as assistance to do that up level conservation. So to give you an example, a producer may potentially be let's see, Corey, help me out with that one. Is Corey on there? Producer may be.
I'm here, Al.
It just came to mind. I think I have one. Producer may originally in EQIP be doing a one species cover crop, but under the stewardship program, they may be going in doing multiple species, which is a higher level of conservation for their CSP contract. So it's partnering what you're already doing and increasing it to the next level. It's just one example. Any other questions, or is that clear?
Okay, so there's one more question. I'm gonna ask if you can respond to it in the chat because of time constraints. Okay, so that question was about a CSP deadline. It looked like Corey has addressed it, but you may take a look at it just to appease the landowner. So we thank you so much for your presentation, and we look forward to hearing from our next speaker, and that is Mr. Joseph Friend, and he's going to talk to us about Farm Service Agency farm numbers. And I introduced him earlier, but I'll introduce him again. He's the UAPB Keeping the Family Forester, and he's also the Arkansas Department of Agriculture Board of Registration Executive Director. So Joe, you've got our attention.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. The farm numbers and how to apply for the farm numbers, Alvin covered that, and I think did an excellent job on that. So I'm going to go a little different direction. Justin did an excellent job of talking about forest management, the need for having a forest management plan, and the need for using silviculture to keep your forest growing as healthy as possible. The healthier your forest is, the more money you're going to make off of it, the more wildlife you're going to have on it. And so it just makes sense. But what I'm going to do is basically open the floor up for questions, if that's okay with Karen and Yvette, to see if y'all have any forest management questions that I can answer. And let me reiterate that I'm at your service. I work for the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff as your forester, and if you have timber property, or if you want to have property you want to grow trees on, I will be happy to look at your property and make suggestions to you, see what your interests are, and get the right help for you to get a forest management plan and get the people lined up to do the work that you need to do. Let me also mention real quick, a question was asked about the minimum size for signing up for EQIP. One thing I would like to point out is that due to the size of logging equipment, harvesting equipment, uh, if you've got less than 20 acres of timberland now, it's going to be real difficult to find someone to carry out the forest practices on that timberland, especially if it's isolated. Now, if you've got some neighbors that have similar needs, then sometimes you can combine that land and get the work done. But most loggers now that are in the business have between 500,000 and $1 million worth of equipment, and they can't just pick up that equipment and move it for 10 or 15 acres of timberland. But we will work with you if that's what you've got, and we will try to find somebody that will help you harvest that timber. We will try to find somebody that will do the management work that you need done on it, and so that it can help you make money on your property and have something of value. And
Okay.
I'm available for questions, Yvette.
Yes, sir. So I'm seeing some pop up here. One of the questions is, does quail preservation fall under forest management?
It falls under wildlife management, which also reverts back to forest management. Um, so yes, the way you manage your forest can help manage quail. Uh, you follow the guidelines for maybe having some brush piles on your property for them to hide in. You do control burning at the right times of year so that you're not going to burn up the quail's nest or the baby quail. You maybe leave your stand more open and have a more diverse stand, and rather than having a solid stand of pine trees, maybe have a diverse stand of pine and oak and so forth. You need to keep in mind also, though, that some things you do to promote wildlife may reduce the income you'll make off your property, although not significantly enough not to manage for the wildlife.
Okay. And then there's another question here. It says, please speak on the responsibility of the landowner when a woodland equip practice has been established on their land.
Okay, when when you apply for an equip practice and you get approved by the NRCS office, you will actually sign a contract with the NRCS office saying that you're going to carry out that contract for the amount of cost share assistance that they're going to give you for doing that. So you have a certain time period, usually it's within a year. Excuse me just a minute. You have a time period, usually it's within a year. It depends on a lot of factors. A lot of things you do related to forestry are highly dependent on the weather. In the wet years that we've been having here lately, it's made it very difficult to get things done like harvesting, uh, planting trees, doing site preparation. Uh, all of that has impacted things. Control burning. It's hard to burn when everything's wet. So sometimes NRCS, due to circumstances, can extend the amount of that contract. But you are under contract once you sign that contract, and if you don't meet the terms of the contract, then you will have to repay the money that you obtained from the NRCS. And Alvin could answer that question a whole lot more clearly than I can.
So I have a question here, and I'm not sure who I would direct it to, but say if you had, oh, I don't know, 35, 40 acres, it's overgrown, it has some timber, but your real thought process is you just want to clear the land and farm it. Does that go under EQIP or CRP or CSA, or which program would that be?
That would probably fall under the EQIP program. It's hard for me as a forester to speak of clearing land and turning it into farmland. However, it's your land and it's your right to do with it what you want to do. And by all means, if you're going to make a farm out of it, work with the NRCS and make sure that you follow conservation practices on it. And if I had some land, I'd probably have a little bit of it as farmland also, if truth be known. So, yes, I would definitely work through the NRCS, and try to get EQIP funding to, if you didn't make it totally, pasture land or farmland, you might make it, silvopasture, which is a combination of growing trees and growing grass for cattle.
Mhm.
And the NRCS pays for establishing silvopasture through the EQIP program also.
Okay, that's a very helpful answer. Thanks a lot.
All right, Joe. I think you may want to check the chat box. It looked like there's another question here from Miss Brown. And then actually, let me see. Okay, so we'll take one more question and then we've got to move on. So the question here is, if you could speak on the importance of not paying a vendor until forest
Yes.
approves.
Uh, when you get forestry work done, whether it's planting trees or doing a herbicide injection work to do a timber stand improvement on your property, or any type of work that you have done, if it's being funded through the EQIP program, then the Arkansas Department of, well, the Arkansas Division of Forestry, under the Arkansas Department of Agriculture, has the responsibility to inspect that work to make sure you're getting a quality job. Sometimes tree planters have a bad day or something, and they may mess up the planting job on your property, and you not get, what we expect to be a good quality planting job. If you've already paid that tree planter for doing the work before it's inspected, it's going to be really difficult to get him to come back and fix your planting job because he's already got paid. He's not worried about it anymore. But if he's still waiting on his money, and the Department of Forestry, Department of Agriculture Division of Forestry goes out and inspects that planting job, and they turn it down, say, no, it's less than 70%. We don't recommend it's funded. Then if that vendor is still waiting on his money, he's going to say, oh, well, what do I need to do to fix this so I can get paid? Because, he's waiting on his money from the landowner, and he's got to pay his workers. And unless you pay him, he can't do that. So we recommend you don't pay the vendors until you get something from the Forestry Commission saying, we expect it and we inspected it, and we recommend you pay them. And I apologize for keep using the term Forestry Commission. That's what it was for the 34 and a half years that I worked there. So it's, I have trouble remembering the new name sometimes.
Okay, Joe, thank you for opening your time up for question and answers. I think that was a good component to this meeting. So you may check
Thank you. And I want all the landowners to know I'm available to come out and help you. My phone number is 870-500-8454. And just give me a call. Now, I work part-time, so, you know, if you call me, it may be 2 to 3 weeks before I get to your property, but we'll get there. Thank you.
All right, very good. And you all may have seen that Joe got a very nice recommendation or comment about the services that he provides. So Joe, he's a really good contact to have, a really good forester. So our next speaker here, thank you, Joe. Our next speaker here is going to be Dr. Henry English. He is with UAPB Small Farm Program Director, and he is going to make some final remarks and closing. Dr. English.
Thank you, Yvette. As you can see, I'm down at Karen's office, and today I went and got my my shot. You know, that coronavirus shot. I got it this afternoon, so if I'm a little leery, you know what's going on. Of course, Karen has not taken hers as of yet.
You look just fine, Dr. English.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel okay right now, too. But I just want to say thank you to the speakers. Anthony Reed from Alcorn, we've been working with him for, I don't know, about 10 or 15 years. We do a lot of risk management educations together. I think Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas, we just did a risk management project together, the 3 states. So I was very glad to see Anthony here, you know, and giving that presentation. I thought he did an excellent job. In fact, I think all the speakers did an excellent job. And I want to thank Karen for putting this meeting together in such a short time. You know, and I want to thank everybody also for getting on tonight, because a lot of people do not get on at night. But I'm seeing now that we are, that we're having an excellent turnout. So I'm very glad to see that. We're putting these meetings on. As long as we get a good turnout, we will continue to put these meetings on. If people have a title or something that they would like for us to discuss, please let us know it, and we'll try to get that information together. I think Karen will tell you about the meetings that we're having next week. I want to mention those, but I'll let Karen do that. But I do want to say that we have started our Beginning Farmers program. We just started that. And we are looking for people to participate in that particular program. In Southwest Arkansas, please contact Candy Williams, and she can tell you all about that particular program in that particular area. I think we've gotten a few calls from people in that area, but we want everybody to know that we have just started our Beginning Farmers program, and we're looking for people to, you know, participate in that. We will have a class, okay, and we have a program. Now the class was designed to be a hands-on class where we would actually do things out in the field and teach you how to do some stuff hands-on. But the virus has sort of slowed that down, etc. And we do have a program. And in the program, we identify beginning farmers, those who have farmed 10 years, you know, or less. And we help them, I guess, we provide a little extra assistance to them, whether it be in finances, whether it be in, when I say finance, I'm talking about financial education. We don't have any money. Don't get me wrong, that we don't have any money. We've had people to call and ask us about money. We don't have any money, but we'll help you put together a business plan and look at that operation, see if it's economically feasible. Also, we'll help you with your production, put together a production plan. Make sure you got everything that you need, and there's some things that you need to look at, and also a marketing plan. So those are the things that we're looking to work with beginning farmers on right now. So if you know anybody in that, and we're particularly looking for people in Southwest Arkansas and Kansas area. So with that, I will stop and turn it over to Karen. Okay, Karen.
Okay. Just again, want to say thank you everyone for attending. Our next meeting will be, we have a meeting next week. It's a 2-day meeting, February the 9th and February the 10th. It's a vegetable production clinic. On the first day, we will talk about disease, weed control, insect management, and then the day 2, we will actually talk about different type of vegetable productions. Both of the workshops will be from 8, it start at 8:30 each day. That information is coming. On February the 16th, we will have a financial opportunity workshop about bridging the gap. That workshop will start at 9 a.m. On February the 22nd, we will have a family tree and squatters law workshop. That one will be also in the daytime. It will be at 9 a.m. And the last one that we have scheduled for right now is March the 1st, and it will be at 9 a.m. and it's a hemp production workshop. We want to thank you all again for attending. Thank you very much, Yvette, for moderating and hosting this event. Thank you very much for the Keeping It in the Family team. You guys do an awesome job all of the time. You are priceless. There's so much assistance available that is free. So much expertise that is available that is free. It's just you have to take advantage of it. It's no sense of the knowledge being out there. We present all this knowledge to you and you don't utilize it. That's just not being a good steward. So hopefully the information that you have been presented today, you will take advantage of and utilize the services so that you can have sustainability in your practices, so that your family has something for generations to be proud of the decisions that you're making today, because those decisions and the practices that you start today will impact generations. So be a good steward with what you get. That's it. That's all I have, Yvette.
Miss Karen, I'm so sorry. I have
Okay.
a question for the conservationist, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Ms. Thornton, she asked, well, she's stating, we have land that is divided by a river and access is blocked by the owner of property on the other side. What should we do? Can someone answer that question for her?
Lavelle?
Karen, I don't know the particulars on that particular question in the details in general. When I hear that someone has land on the other side of the river and access is blocked on the other side, in most cases, there's an ingress, egress on any property that you have a right to get in and out of your property. If that is the only way that that person has to get into that property, that owner does not have a right to block that access to that property, if that is the legal route. Now, a lot of times in order to get through that process, you wind up having, if you can't work it out with that owner, you wind up having to carry them to court to resolve it. The first objective is to try to work with your adjacent landowner to hopefully have a little common sense and try to work things out. But in all reality, the final say is to carry them to court if you can't get it to work, because you do have a right to through the end and to the access of your property. And if that was the legal way to get there, that owner does not have a right to block it.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that question. There's also one person sent me a private message by an iPhone. If you would please send me a direct message and let me know who you are so I can answer that question.
Okay, while we're waiting on that to happen, I just want to say again, this presentation is being recorded. It doesn't just automatically transfer over once the meeting is over. It has to have time to, what's the word? My mind just it has to have time to convert to where it's in a form that we can send it out. So that won't happen tonight. I'm already sleepy. So it wouldn't be available until tomorrow. If you would please make sure that you have your email address in the chat box so that I can send this to you. If not, you have to email and request it at leek@uapb.edu, and then we can respond that way. But it's just not going to be available tonight. It'll probably take 2 hours for it to convert. So I won't be doing that tonight. So again, put your information in the chat or shoot us an email at leek@uapb.edu.
Okay, so Miss Karen, I just saw a question come through. Will the presentation be in a PDF form, or could it be converted into PDF slides?
The presentation will be in video form. I have requested everyone to send me their slides. I have a couple of them already, just because I have them already, but the presentation will be in the form of a video where the slides obviously are in there. But if you want just the slides, then you can request just the slides. And if I have those presentations, then I can send you that particular presentation.
Okay. All right. So I guess that is it. Everyone, please have a good night and stay safe. And we look forward to meeting with you all sometime in the near future.